G'day guys and gal! In sci-fi settings, the vision of a future Earth has been explored countless times. Sometimes nuclear holocausts turn our world into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Sometimes AIDS gets airborne and ruins everyone's shit. And sometimes communism prevails, leading us to a glorious golden utopia. China number one. However, it's quite rare that a setting would envision every possible outcome for our Earth all in one go. Earth, or Terra as it's called in the grim dark setting of 40k, has suffered complete environmental collapse, entered a golden age, has been nuked to shit, and is now currently one planet-wide city that is absolutely miserable to live on. Like, I'm talking population in the quadrillions, which is obscene to think about. Today we'll go over the history of mankind's birthplace, before then diving into what life is like on Terra and what purpose does the cradle of humanity serve in the current millennium. Let's get into it. The ancient history of Terra lines up pretty closely with our own Earth, with some key differences. One of those being that evolution from monkeys to humans was likely due to the old ones having a bit of a cheeky dabble with their DNA, and that the ancient shamans on Earth were actually very early psykers. Other than a few name changes, like America, Germany, and Britannia, the landmasses and history of Terra are almost the same. After the 21st century, for the next 10,000-ish years, mankind on Terra entered into an age of progress, where scientific achievement and peace became the vibe. Our local star system was colonized, and the 420th remaster of Skyrim was released. Humanity did make some attempts at leaving our local solar system to colonize distant promising star systems, but without faster than light travel, it was taking a long-ass time to reach even nearby systems. Regardless, these 10,000 years looked a lot like our standard sci-fi predictions would. There would have been some degree of environmental preservation and population control, as Terra and Mars would have needed to produce enough food to feed the entire solar system, along with the fact that humanity before the Age of Strife was considered pretty enlightened. Then, in the 18th millennium, the warp drive was invented, a tool that allowed ships to cover extremely far distances in incredibly short amounts of time. Trips that would take thousands of years now only took 2 weeks. Yes, there were some horrifically violent and unfortunate warp-related accidents when the drives were first being tested, but after the subsequent invention of the Geller fields, mankind was ready to absolutely fucking send it. And send it they did. Large swathes of the galaxy were colonized as mankind's population exploded. Contact and agreements were made with the Eldar and other Xenos, whilst orcs stood little chance against the might of mankind at its peak. Throughout all of this, Terra remained the beating heart of mankind and its capital. It wasn't yet some religious shrine or anything silly by this point, as mankind was in its golden age, also ironically called its dark age. Hence they were leaning pretty heavily on the atheist side of things. In the 22nd millennium, navigators began to randomly pop up, which allowed for even greater warp travel. Humanity was unstoppable. Until it fucking wasn't. They must not have been watching many movies in the 25th millennium, as when their legions of robotic AI servants rode up against them, they were taken by surprise. All their obscene weaponry was turned on themselves as they battled for their very existence. Mankind, with the help of various Xenos, did triumph over their ungrateful asshole robots, but the damage was bad. To make matters worse, various psykers began to pop up across the galaxy, and without the training and conditioning that psykers need, they were soon possessed by demons and became living gateways to hell. On top of this, the Eldar were in the process of murder-fucking Slaanesh into existence, which filled up the galaxy with warp storms, making warp travel incredibly difficult, cutting off mankind's empire from itself. Thousands of worlds fell, whilst pretty much all the others severely regressed. Even Terra could not escape the horrors of the Age of Strife, as it was called. Most of their people and cities were devastated by the evil men of Iron, as well as the rampaging psykers. However, to their credit, they were able to overcome both challenges. However, humanity was mentally scarred and untrusting. Instead of reuniting their world and attempting to reclaim their empire, the humans on Terra thought it would be funny to nuke the ever-living shit out of each other, turning Terra into an irradiated wasteland that was more or less Mad Max with bits of sci-fi thrown in here and there. Mars visited Terra to see how things were going and if they could rebuild mankind's empire. However, they were so disgusted by how savage and regressed their neighbors had become that they simply left the planet to rot. This is how Terra remained for the next 5,000 years. Like, shit did stabilize a bit. The environment actually made a bit of a comeback due to the massively reduced human population. Various empires rose, some of which still maintain various technologies from mankind's golden age. With the birth of Slaanesh soon to occur, an opportunity arose, an opportunity that one gold-obsessed man took. See, the Emperor had been on Terra this whole time. Man was over 20,000 years old. However, he did not intervene or try to take over, as A, mankind was doing fine, and B, mankind had the means to destroy him if they did not like what he had to say. Hence, with mankind now in its weakened state, as well as the fact that Slaanesh's birth would remove most of the warp storms that prevented interstellar travel, the Emperor made his move. Combining his overpowered psychic abilities with his knowledge of biomancy, the Emperor led the greatest army mankind had seen in over 5,000 years. One by one, the empires of Terra fell and joined the Emperor's Imperium of Man. Once the Unification Wars, as it was called, came to a close, the Emperor lubed himself up and prepared to have his way with the galaxy, hence took off into the stars. Terra was once again the heart of mankind's second attempt at clapping some galactic cheeks. It quickly went from a polluted wasteland to a very populated and polluted megacity. Only one ocean remained on Terra for a time, but that too was soon polluted beyond use and eventually evaporated. To the Emperor's credit, the mad lad did turn the entire Himalayan mountains into a fuck-off huge imperial palace, so that was pretty cool. It basically became Coruscant from Star Wars, but way shittier and way more populated. But don't worry, it would get even shittier. When Horus went full Bul jihadist mode and attacked Terra, the world was fortified. Most of the beautiful and cultural architecture was torn down and replaced with vicious fortifications. When the battle begun, the only place that was actually properly defended was the Imperial Palace. The rest of the world was told to basically just clench their assholes real tight. At first, the people of Terra were mostly okay, as the traders focused their efforts on sieging the palace. But as the siege went on, the Emperor's children Space Marines got bored, and they decided to use the populace of Terra for entertainment. They hunted, killed, and kidnapped millions of people before, I kid you not, turning them into space cocaine. Terrible time to be an Imperial citizen. But here's the kicker. Despite a shitload of them dying, the world was so populated that it barely made a dent. Horus dies and the Emperor ascends to godhood, being placed onto the Golden Throne and turning Terra into one big wank fiesta for the Emperor. Although it seemed impossible, Terra's population once again dramatically increased. No longer was it just the capital of mankind, it was now the resting place of humanity's literal god. Even the irradiated sewage of the world was now considered sacred and holy. Over the next 10,000 years, various bad apocalyptic shit would hit Terra and cause millions of deaths, but there's so many people that it really didn't matter. When an orc attack moon blew up above the throne world, thousands of moon shards fell onto the planet and killed hundreds of millions of people, but that accounted for less than 1% of the population, so who cares? Even when the Great Rift opened and a fuck-off huge army of Khorne attacked Terra, so many people died, either via demon attack or just the planet-wide riots and panic, but it was brushed off pretty quickly. Every bit of food, water, and natural resource in Terra has to be imported, as the planet has been stripped clean. If there is a delay in a food shipment arriving, thousands of people will starve to death, but it's such a minute thing that it just doesn't really matter. There are multiple chaos cults and gene stealer cults on Terra, but they can't really do much, as there is just too many people around. Imagine Terra is a cookie, and a gene stealer cult is a single bacterium that wants to eat the cookie. It's just not going to happen. There is too much cookie for such a small creature to consume. If the cult gets too big or annoying, then the Imperium won't hesitate to incinerate an entire city to get rid of them. Same with chaos cults. So as it stands, Terra is an extremely polluted, overpopulated world full of suffering and poverty that consumes an obscene amount of resources on the daily whilst outputting very little itself. So is Terra even worth it? Should the Imperium let it collapse and focus on other worlds? Fuck no. Here's why. Terra's obscene population means it is the perfect recruitment ground for all the various wings of the Imperium. If only 0.01% of humans are capable of becoming Inquisitors, or Space Marines, or Imperial officials, or some kind of valuable person, that means that if we lowball Terra's population to be 1 quadrillion, there would be 10 billion viable candidates on the one world. It would be a gold mine for extremely rare and talented people. On top of that, it houses the Emperor, who powers and directs the Astronomicon, which is a beacon that guides mankind's ship through the warp. Without the Astronomicon, warp travel becomes extremely difficult and dangerous. On top of that, the headquarters for most of the Imperium's extremely important organizations are located on Terra, the heart of the Inquisition, the Ecclesiarchy, and the Administratum, just to name a few. Why don't we just move them all then? Even for the Imperium, that's a huge logistical nightmare. There was once a High Lord that moved the Ecclesiarchy to a different world, and when he moved it back, the effort killed millions of people and cost a fuckload of resources. So many in fact, that it actually resulted in his downfall. Also, the Astronomicon and the Golden Throne, which is 100 times more important than anything else on Terra combined, cannot be moved. If I was in control of Terra, I would just put some shit in the water that would make half the world infertile or something. What's life like on Terra exactly? Well, I think I've already painted a good picture, but it's basically divided into two classes. One class, which makes up like 0.01% of the population, are people who work officially within the Imperium. Arbites, scribes, administratums, all that kind of stuff. People who actually have a purpose and aren't just on Terra to lick the dirt. Their lives, although not amazing, are lives that are livable. Small apartments, some time to rest occasionally, and away from all the crime and buzz of the rest of the world. To be honest, the greatest honor on Terra would be to get sent away on official business. For the other 99.99% of the world, fucking shit life, fight over scraps, barely any time to yourself, and if a food or water delivery is slow, then yeah, have fun avoiding the cannibals. The grimdark irony of 40k is that on mankind's homeworld, their capital, the resting place of their god, life is as bad as it gets. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 per month give you access to a boatload of Battle Makes 40 million hentai. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more earthly content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.